Facing changes in prayer. Prayer is a vital part of our lives. When we enter into crises, prayer goes with us. As valuable as it is and as central as it may be, when we go through a period of suffering, the nature of our prayer life changes. It enters the trauma along with the rest of our lives. No area is left untouched. I often find myself counseling people on ways to adapt their prayer life to the changes in their body throughout the dying process. As their body weakens, the need for prayer is still as strong, but they're not as physically capable of mustering the focus necessary to pray as they once did. For some, this will mean forgetting well-memorized and heartfelt prayers. For others, they will lose the ability to know how to pray, while in the past they were able to pray extemporaneously quite naturally. Their inability to pull words together coherently is troublesome and causes so much frustration. I generally ask people to keep a picture of Christ, the Virgin, the Buddha, the Ten Commandments, the prophets, or some other religious artifact like a rosary close to their bed, within viewing distance, or perhaps a kippah or skull cap. I ask them to spend a little time each day looking upon that image and offering a short prayer while still able. I ask them to send the image or the object a sense of love or caring, tenderness, appreciation, thankfulness, gratefulness, joy, and compassion. I ask them to send these things from their hearts and from their eyes. I ask them to communicate simply and silently from within. Gradually, we build a practice that will help when we become weaker and weaker. Through this process, they are extending and retraining their ongoing spiritual selves. Changing the nature of prayer life is a way of concretely preparing for the changes that lie ahead. Primarily, the goal is to shift the awareness of prayer from the mindful task of remembering prayers or ways of praying to a new heartfelt task of gazing and admiring. This shift to gazing and admiration will become important and is more and more so as people weaken, lose their train of thought, and become unable to speak. The focus on admiration also opens people's hearts to the presence of God in stillness and quiet rest. There is an old story of two religious masters who came to meet each other for the first time. One was the head of the Western Christendom, and the other was the head of a large Buddhist sect. The Western master sent an emissary to the Eastern master's monks to establish knowledge of what the proper protocol should be. How should they greet one another? The Eastern monks said that they should bow respectfully, be silent, gaze on each other's visage, and see the presence of the divine in each other. This seemed proper to the Pope, so that is how they greeted one another when they met. This kind gazing is also called benevolent glances, and it's an ideal practice for silence and meetings. As death approaches, the practice of silence becomes more and more necessary. Perhaps it's not a silence that the dying prefer or call forth, but the weakening condition of the body and the mind necessitate this silence. Communicating through glances. I encourage people to think about communicating through these glances. That is, I urge them to send love and joy, appreciation and acceptance through their eyes and the warmth of their heart. They should send these things to each person that comes to see them. This encouragement and request also comes with the instruction that their disease progression and weakness at some point is speeding up, and that they will become more and more exhausted, and they will not be able to engage in old ways of communicating. So I urge them to practice this way of communicating while they're still strong, so it's not a surprise or too difficult to practice when the actual need arises. Now, this is no different with prayer. Prayer is the communication that we have with the Most High, and as we progress to death, it will also become limited and reduced, as will all forms of speech and communication. Therefore, it's best to practice forms of prayer that require no verbal communication and minimal use of energy, sort of a way of getting ready for when this does happen. Practice will enable us to feel less awkward when the actual need arises to pray this way all of the time. It will also ensure that we are able to perform this form of prayer in a more refined manner, because practice does make perfect. Recently, I spent time with a man named Bob. He had a brain tumor and was clearly losing his ability to communicate. Ideas were clearly presenting themselves to him interiorly, but he was not able to get those ideas out to the people that were around him. He was losing his ability to put words to thoughts, ideas, feelings, and impressions. It was painful to be with Bob. It became increasingly more difficult to watch him struggle and to see his resulting frustration. I worked more openly with him than I ever have with any other patient. Bob wanted things to be all out on the table. His frustration led me to give him a week-by-week explanation of the limitations he was up against. It was clear that we needed to review alternative forms of communication. It was more apparent in Bob than in anyone else that we are not our bodies. He and I spoke about this idea, and he affirmed throughout the diminishment of his skills that he understood he was more than simply his body. He was more than what he was able to communicate. There comes a time in illnesses unto death that we have no control over what comes next. Not that we ever really do, but we do have control over our coping with what comes next. Silent prayer, ritual gazing, these are ways of coping with the weakening condition of our bodies, minds, emotions, and drives. They are forms of communication that can be applied to all of our relationships, not just the one we share with the divine. The space in us that routine prayer creates can often become a healing balm in and of itself, a peaceful, serene cave of the heart. Let me repeat that. The space in us that routine prayer creates can often become a healing balm in and of itself, a peaceful, serene cave of the heart. Just beginning the daily routine of prayer can flood us with images of peace, compassion, tenderness, and comfort. This routine may not heal our bodies, but it will tenderly nurse and soothe our minds and our hearts and our souls.